The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a life I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine. Come to know and find out what is true, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a life I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine.
Happy Holy Day, Moors. Welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for the exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, I am pleased to present to you our National Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey, as he presents jurisdiction challenges to address treaty violations. But before he begins, please be sure to like, share, and if you have not already done so, subscribe to our channel. Now, let's receive Grand Sheik Taj Tarik Bey.
Islam, Dr. J.
Islam.
Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Vadi Makum. Going aboard. Dr. Yahida, the honor of talking to cousin Truth Ali, last week. He called me a couple of times. And of course, as you already know, he made it to when we had the convention at the house, and he was there and he shared with us some of the books and updated materials that he and his wife teach their children, prepared for the children, and also being prepared for the nation and the tribes at large, etc. And so one of the things that he had mentioned in one of his books, which I don't have here right now, but I want to mention, he was discussing the issue of certiorari, writs of certiorari, which, of course, as you already know, we've always promoted that principle of the challenging of the jurisdiction in accord with established law, for actually decades among the people. But knowing that many of our people aren't aware of their own obligation to self in their relationship to administrators that are operating on the land, civil jurisdiction on the land that the people commonly recall or refer to as the United States. Now, so we're going to state certain facts for parameters of consciousness so that the people can have a proper concept of why we're even talking about this, knowing what's going on in the world, in the geopolitics, as we've talked about. And because we're already in the, by default, the call and response operations happening all around the world with nation states nationalizing their resources and also expelling representatives and military operatives from other nation states who have been occupying their lands, whether by choice or by occupation, that has caused much of the din that's going on around the world. And knowing that most of our people here, the Aboriginal people and Indigenous people, many of them are becoming conscious that they're actually the people, the Americans of the land, and learning to know that the so-called reconstructed dynamics of what is known as the so-called Black diaspora is, for the most part, a total fraud. Now, because we have been behind in the consciousness of geopolitics, most of the nation states and the tribal clans around the world already and always knew that the United States was a private corporation subsidiary of the Vatican Crown Empire. Repeat, the United States is not a country. The United States is a subsidiary of the Vatican Crown Empire. That's the fact. So when you go into geopolitical conversations, most of our people having limited knowledge of the real politics because we've been trained for so many generations under animal husbandry, when fundamental, and we're talking fundamental, true civics is discussed, most of our people are already out of the loop. And this is why a lot of times, Dr. G, a lot of things that we talk about, and maybe a handful of other people who know the truth about the Al-Moroccan, or what is known as the American history, and know about the Reconstruction, and know about things like the Trading with the Enemy Act, the Organic Act of Congress 1871, February 2nd, and things along that line, and the last desperate reincorporation of the United States Corporation Company operating civil jurisdiction on the land, America, that the corporation itself and those people who are part and owners of that corporation are in fact not Americans, although they keep using that term. And I don't think I already know, and you can tell when you're having these conversations with people, the reason why you lose them in the conversation, because most of them don't know geopolitics, don't know real Al-Moroccan history, don't know the obligations of treaties, don't know Certiorari writ principles. They are not aware of diversity, and they're not aware of the interregnum operations. Although they talk about, in general conversations, the different economic and social problems that we're having, most of the conversations will lean or be centered around arguing controlled narrative symptoms of the interregnum operations. Now, however, because what's going on in the world for real, outside of people's emotional approach, and knowing, and this is true, and you know it and I know it too, because we often have these conversations, because so many people on our side are compromised and won't have these kind of conversations with the people. They will project as if this kind of information doesn't apply to the people at large, when it absolutely does. As an example, like I said to you before, when we were talking about even the social politics in contemporary times, about issues concerning our people, right? Here in North America, the economic abuses, physical abuses, jurisdictional abuses, redlining, all kinds of abuses, murders on the street, etc., that we have been trained to call racism, none of which it is. You're dealing with unum sanctum policy, which we all already know. And whenever our people make arguments, they immediately go to what is the controlled narrative of what we call the race card, right? Not knowing that that's a diversion, that's not really what's going on. No different than most of our people are not aware of when they're talking about the gentrification of our communities and things like that, along that line. They'll talk about racism, prejudice, blah, 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 but they will not talk about the doctrine of discovery, which is really the tracer or the foundation of the operation of the interregnum operations of the pseudo-administrative government, i.e., in almost all court cases relative to land claims, people fighting for their estates or trying to take control of the estates of their mothers and fathers that they leave with land and everything, which have been, without their permission, already taken into probate. almost every time. Like say, for instance, like say as an example, when your mother passed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now downstairs, I remember the picture you have of your mother on the wall, and you give me a little bit of history. But I'm talking in principle so that people can understand what certiorari is, all right, and interregnum is, so that our conversation makes sense to them, if you get the point. Because it's important, particularly now that the treasury bonds are not being accepted around the world. And our people, for the most part, don't know its direct relationship to themselves because they think it's just the stock market that they have no part in type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or 55 Water Street with the derivatives, think it has nothing to do, it has everything to do with them. Now, say your mother passed, and logically, as we grow up, we know some things about our parents, but we don't know everything about our parents, as an example.
Right.
As another example, like say your mother inherited land and estate and financial wealth from your great grandmother coming down just in their life, their everyday lives, right? And so when you're growing up, everything is not necessarily discussed with you, if you get the point. Not that they're hiding things from you, but information gets lost from generations, right? And the wealth gets lost, and by people not knowing that the governing administrative body operating political jurisdiction on the land, i.e. North America, are an interregnum. They're not aware that that's an interregnum, just like our people don't know that they're de facto. Things as simple as that, but actually operatively negative in its response to us. And not even knowing that every time a generation moves, the corporate operatives of the interregnum government, etc., immediately, without really notifying necessarily the heirs, already take the estate into probate, and it's established just like that, right? Now, the average person or people don't refer to themselves in heirship. They would just refer to them, oh, my mother passed, or my grandfather or my uncle passed, and he had some land in Carolina, and they have some land in New York, and they have some land in New Jersey. And I don't know about that, but we got to get in touch with some lawyer to talk about it, blah, blah. Unbeknownst to them, the corporate state already probated and made claim on it. And that's standard fare all the time, not sometime, all the time. So you have generations that have been artificially and wrongfully disinherited by de facto interregnum corporate, foreign corporate governments that the people are not made aware of, and also don't know that they're interregnum, because their mind is, oh, the governor of New Jersey or the mayor of Wilmington type thing, and relate that to themselves from a political body politic perspective, not knowing that all, not some, and I'm repeating, Dr. J, all persons holding any political office at North America under the social political body politic corporate operations of interregnum known as the United States and the so-called several states are all de facto and are all interregnum, past and present. Yes.
So when you say interregnum, you mean, because I know the meaning of interregnum is when a period of suspension, meaning
It is exactly that.
It's not really
Exactly
operative,
that.
or it's not operative.
It's operative, but it's de facto.
It's de facto.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
Now, so they're exercising what is known universally on the planet as sovereign powers that actually are not vested in them. Well, we're clear. Problem, this is where the problem comes from. You know how, like, often when we're having these conversations and we will redundantly show the people the corporate papers of the United States because the masses aren't aware that the United States is a private corporation because they've been trained from childhood in school that the United States is a country, right? So they don't know that that's a subdivision of the Vatican Crown Empire, right? So now, and that's not accidental. But for those among our people who in recent years are becoming conscious that they are really indigenous and Aboriginal clans and tribes of the ancient Canaanite Moabites, who are the first peoples, i.e., also known in the history of migration on the planet as the Phoenicians, first Al-Moroccan people, or the first people, and also referred to as the First Nation. And we're dealing with different tribes, whether we're dealing with the fundamental larger tribes that have been here for thousands of years, the Bantu, Mandinka, etc., Phoenici, all of them basically Phoenici tribes and clans, and are commonly referred to in contemporary times collectively as Al-Moroccans or short Moors. Classified also as Indians, classified, it's not the identity, Indians, blacks, Negroes, coloreds, all of these are Phoenicis, right? But for the social engineering, they're referred to as Indians, blacks, Negroes, colored. Now, because the people are for the most part not looking at, quote unquote, the diversity, the established reality that the standing is defaulted to diversity, right? Now, by many of the people not knowing the nom de guerre operations, and then some do, and many of the people who know the nom de guerre operations loosely just refer to them as branding, okay, brands, right? Not knowing that the branding or nom de guerre system is a deliberated legal system of classifying what is known politically as chattels. So human beings that are classified, I say this identity, classified with nom de guerre are held as chattels. Write that down because it's very important to understand the relationship with the interregnum operatives under the rule of universal rule of international law called administrative functions. Now, when I had mentioned, Dr. G, say act as an example, because a lot of people, even a lot of people who have been exposed to proper standing correction with recognition of the interregnum operations would be, as an example, be presented with that, like as an example, like I had mentioned to you before, Act 1 of the Moorish Temple of Science, or the Old Canaanite Temple, which most people know today as the Moorish Science Temple of America, right? Now I'm gonna show you an example, right, in government. And this is so that to help people, whether they're sheiks, grand sheiks, etc., who are operative in the Moorish Holy Temple of Science and the Moorish Science Temple of America, both of which are operative extensions of the Old Canaanite Temple set forth by Sheik Sharif Abdul Ali, commonly known as Noble Drew Ali, as an example, right? So the administrative functions, just give you a synopsis, right? So administrative, or to administrate, and the administration principle relates to the operative charge, the moral and ethical direction of the ethical management of government. In law and at law, the act of administration or the function of an administrator is to mete out or to act as an executive or trustee for an organization, an association, a body politic, etc. And thus, administrative pertains to the administration and executive functions. So executive relates to or is adoptive to the putting into practical effect practical effect, keep that in mind, quote unquote. The plans, the projects, the business for civic relations, for social progress, and for work programs, etc. A trustee is one who holds property in trust, being a body of men or women who hold property or responsibilities to manage the affairs of an organization, a foundation, a nation, etc. Now, that's principle all over the planet. By the people being steered to always make race arguments, they are distracted from the proper argument being administered under interregnum without knowing that. All right, this is why it's dangerous when people keep saying, quote unquote, my senator, my possessive congressman, congresswoman, my mayor, not knowing that all of these people are interregnum operatives, because their training has been that that's my government and I'm a citizen of that government. All improper, all incorrect, all total foul, all total fraud. Now, because it's been operating for the last couple of 100 years, and particularly relative for all you scholars out there, and you politicians already know it. You big time preachers, y'all already know it too. All Masons know it, all Eastern Stars know it. So that's not even a debate. And we're not attacking anyone. We're just reaching out to common people who are suffering for not understanding social political standing and the diversity principle. So when you're dealing with the diversity principle, you're dealing with constitutional / treaty enforcement. A certiorari writ is that which is presented as an example, like when you look at the Act 1 as example, Dr. G, the Moorish Temple of America, right? It says what the administrator, chairman, administrator, and moderator put in power to make law and to enforce law if he or she lives according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and it is known by all the members of the Moorish Science Temple of America, etc. Right? So that is an administrative function of what it would be known as the diversity principle of people who have been nationalized. So that means they've been restored to proper status. It does not mean that they've learned all the things they need to learn. It means from a political perspective, in public, what is known as public notice, right? These people have been restored to their proper person self in the body's politic and put on notice to the general public and to the interregnum operatives, which by law, and this is universal because now you're dealing with international law, puts them on notice that they have no authority to hold the estate in probate, which is what they've been doing, right? And they've been getting away with it because the people don't know. Now, when the people start arguing about their economic positions, they've already placed enough people among our own that immediately, by training, introduced what is called the Carlos Linnaeus Blumenbach race argument as a standard protocol, and also Civil Rights 14th Amendment interjection, negative law, not constitution, in order to divert them from the real argument, which is the diversity principle, when these same people, whether they're Grand Sheiks, Sheikesses of the Moorish Temple of Science, whether they're any of the leaders that claim to be nation of this or nation of that, or tribe of this or tribe of that, or clan of this, their position, international, is diversity. The certiorari is to put on notice the interregnum party to meet or stand back to their obligations that do not dissipate just because they are operating prima facie de facto, which has been and is currently the standard. Now, so I've identified the operative corruption and misrepresentation of administrative government that's happening right now and been happening. And of course, we've been arguing this forever, Dr. J. But knowing that the truth of the geopolitics makes people uncomfortable, and particularly a lot of people who have what you would call secret skin in the game, or who are compromised, will attack and have been attacking this information because it exposes them too. Now, because as you can see what's happening, as an example, I was talking to my brother today, what's taking place in Mali, in Africa on that side, right? Burkina Faso, right? Niger, this is current right now. What's taking place in South Africa with their claim of genocide operating unlawfully in violation of international law for the last 75, 76 years in Canaan land, also known today as Palestine, when other nation states knew it, were participating in it, funding it, and pretending the genocide wasn't going on and isn't going on, and pretending that the violating party of genocide operations, all right, have been misrepresenting themselves to the world religiously and bloodline pedigree. It's a known fact, never been a secret, right? Including the bribes that were made to Abdullah, which you all can do the research, who was the operative sovereign over, say in the 40s, right after the war. They offered him $2 billion to allow them to enter into Canaan and create this new fiction operations of unum sanctum interregnum operations that is known to the masses today as quote unquote Israel. Now that's the reality. The pattern of those operations are drafted directly from the Christian Black Codes operations of the Doctrine of Discovery operative in North America under European colonial hybrid operations to the people, indigenous people here at North America. That is the bulk, the operations of administrative functions and the interregnum operatives and the operations in Canaan today, and also related to what's going on in Ukraine also, are all absolutely connected. They're not separate. Now, knowing that while the rest of the world in general, mainly the Asiatic and African peoples of the world, by virtue of them being under unum sanctum sanction attack currently, and I know most of you have heard about the BRICS operations and also the diversion from the SWIFT international monetary exchange operations that is currently broken, including the fact that different Asiatic nations around the world, in order to counter the interregnum operations of despotism, and this is where the operatives of the United States Corporation Company, in conjunction with Britain, i.e. the hybrid of body politics of Britain, the Circle Church and Chancery of France and Germany together, established with the Rothschilds, what is known today as the so-called State of Israel, patterned after the conquest of the indigenous people here at North America. Absolute same pattern. That's where they got the working model. So the people here not knowing that these people are an interregnum body, never dawns on them that the certiorari writ is supposed to be interjected by anyone who holds any leadership position, i.e. minister, sheik, tribal chieftain, empress, any so-called leader or representative or presentor for, i.e., indigenous people, Aboriginal people, Moorish nationals. It's universal that the interregnum counter move is always diversity. This is why a lot of times, Dr. G, over the years, like when we encourage people around the country to activate, not to create, to activate the existing platform of treaty and constitution law, i.e. Article 3, Section 2 of that Constitution. And then you'd see people who have other agendas would say that that didn't apply to our people when it absolutely does, including a lot who will say they're indigenous and then deny the reality that the principles of that Constitution that's operative here and that Republican form of government established at Article 4, Section 4, pretend it didn't come from the Anansi Confederation, i.e., which they will refer to as the Iroquois Confederation, and then call the Iroquois Confederation Indians, and then say some men dressed in black came and handed them these papers at Independence Hall at Philadelphia and walked out, and that was the basis upon which Madison, and the other was Morris, drafted what is known today as the Constitution for the United States, derived from the principles established with the Act of 1787, preceded by the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1786, 1787, the adoption and moderation from Madison and Morris, 1788, then 1789 appointed George Washington to divvy up the estate, etc. So the estates on the land became the states under George Washington, who essentially is the 9th president for the operations of the enforcement of the republic, and thus the treaty, diversity, etc., protection of indigenous people. This is why they don't teach the people about, say, John Hanson, Boudinot, and all of these guys. Even one of the signers of that declaratory statement before the adoption of the Constitution, known as the Organic Declaration of Independence, known as John Hancock, and you always see them sign. Most people don't know that he was a president. That's because they hide that history. And so thereafter, we're dealing with, and in particularly, with the operations of the Civil War, and you see that movie they made, Birth of a Nation, right? And the first place that was shown was in Casablanca. So Casablanca is known today as, quote unquote, the White House. That's Casablanca. So in order to hide the history, they made a movie called Casablanca, Morocco, when it's actually talking about the White House that you know today, which is a palace. All right, now that's the reality. Now the point that I'm making is this: because of the reality of the diversity, much of which many of our people, for lack of information, but it doesn't change the reality, don't know that's where their position is. Being encouraged over the decades to follow after and seek partnership within the de facto venue called the 14th Amendment artificial person venue, negative law, it's 1868, negative law, never constitutional. Do the research, I'm just giving you all points of research. So, and particularly since 1954, and y'all can do the research in the congressional records and in the journals, and you'll see that Eisenhower relinquished jurisdiction. That's during the Eisenhower administration, and also when they were hiding some of the information that was leaking out in relationship to some of the outsiders, which we already know about. Some of the outsiders and
when they were making deals with,
they were making, yes,
extra
Yes, we're talking
Terrestrials.
continued parts of the human trafficking that our people don't know, and including, we can get into that, but now we're dealing with, then we trace back to older history that is known among the Asiatics and Africans, but are not taught to the people here. If you get the point.
So they made deals to let them take a certain amount.
Yes,
planet.
Yes.
Okay.
And even though that's not the subject matter at this point, it's related.
But it was the work of an interregnum.
It's exactly.
So they were de facto and
claiming jurisdiction over our bodies.
Right.
Under unum sanctum operations that has been operative here, that's been hidden from the consciousness of the people under the misclassification of racism and prejudice. The Carlos Linnaeus and Blumenbach phenotype operations, mind control system, all right, and reconstruction of human history. And the people don't know that. So we're dealing with interregnum operations, which is also referred to as reconstruction period. So the people are thinking in their mind, according to their training, that after the wars and civil war, blah, 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 blah. See, because it can't be civil, because civil war implies that people of the same tribals are fighting each other.
Right.
That means Americans are fighting Americans. That's civil. That wasn't a civil war. That was the hybrid European colonial wars against Americans and reconstructing history to make the Americans think that the occupiers brought them from someplace else. That's the so-called Black diaspora reconstructed fictional story that many of the people, you don't have to keep arguing with them now, they've come to the realization that they're actually indigenous. And so you have that dynamics going on with people coming out of social bodies politics sleep, but not having all of the structural geopolitics information that's necessary for them to present themselves to the nations of the world to get both aid and assistance to restore their lost estate, which is why we're having this conversation. Because logically, even though we know a lot of damage has been done and a lot of people are not cognate or competent to present themselves to the rest of the world, the desire is there, the intent is there, and many people are now actively claiming their what you call abstract past tense seats in government, etc. Not unlike the Empress when she went to Philadelphia, as an example. Mm-hmm. Not unlike people like this that are doing books like this, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. But they're looking from a religious perspective, not a bloodline perspective. Or they're looking at it as a cross without clear explanation. But the intent is there. The reclaim of a state is there. The nativity claim is there. The heirship claim is there. Now, problem. This is happening on a large scale on the land, right? People recognizing finally that they're really indigenous and they weren't brought from nowhere. They were brought out of their minds by a controlled narrative under unum sanctum operations, even if they don't know about unum sanctum. They have enough information to know that the issue that they suffer from in communication with the interregnum government is an issue of certiorari, of proper standing presented to them relative to their existing obligations to Constitution and treaty. And thus the diversity commands a certiorari claim. You see the point? So this is where, like, whether you're dealing with property, heirship, land, economics, all inheritances, and all things held in probate by all the corporate states, by right law should have been released. But you have a lack of what you would call competent heirship because the people are still in that aggregate gray area of becoming conscious that they're indigenous and not understanding the status that goes with it. Not that it couldn't be understood. We have the unfortunate reality that many of the people who are presenting as leadership are more arguing the race issue and who we really are, and not understanding or not promoting the reality that the issue of diversity should be argued, which would present to both the international community and the interregnum operatives that the heirs are ready to receive their estate, which ultimately most of them are by intent. That's what they're reaching for. But we have to those who know, even though it's a lot of work, yes it is, should stop promoting things that allow our people to keep wasting energy or going in circles with an emotional response to this, instead of a competent standing response to this, to receive the estate that they're all now recognizing that the land is our inheritance. So you need competent people, even though we know, Dr. G, in reality, from a metaphysical and spiritual perspective, that the dynamics of the kingship operations that's been operating here at Midgard Gaia is dying in reality. But because we're in transition, which we are, they will call it reset. But the reset is really backwards or forward, both at the same time. So the Khazarian operatives of the indirectum operatives are trying to block and stagnate the intellectual and spiritual progression of the people so they can maintain the status quo, or quote unquote kill them off before they gain any what you call economic or social political power due to a lack of competence, not a lack of sincerity. Are we clear? They don't lack sincerity, they lack competence. And so again, this is why we're talking about the administrative function, the certiorari, and the diversity issue. And as I was saying earlier, cousin Truth and I was having this discussions about this area of information. And as you already know, he's also produced literature with questions, because that would be related to a certiorari in challenging the jurisdiction, not only the issue of challenging jurisdiction, whether in personam, subject matter, or territorial. And those three principles with subcategory arguments of jurisdiction are always standard fare. They're not just circumstantial with what many people refer to today as so-called conscious community, which is misused, or with conscious Moors, which is often also misused, etc. And know this for a fact. One of the reasons why interrectum operators of the Circle Church and Chancery, via their private foreign corporation known as the Southern Poverty Law Center, start promoting with operations of three-letter agencies run by the Pope through Buckingham Palace, start promoting the fiction of what you hear them often project on Aboriginal people as so-called sovereign citizens. Total fiction. Total fiction. They made that up. That's a counter move to what I'm saying now. Now, of course, you already know, Dr. G, by many of our people not having what you would call geopolitical civic instruction as a standard rule, people who don't understand this would reject it because they're unfamiliar, not knowing that it applies to them. And then a lot of people think it only applies to, quote unquote, what they would consider conscious Moors or nationalized people, of which they may or may not be a participant in, and therefore assume that the principle doesn't apply to them. It still applies to them. You understand what I'm saying? And so I'm addressing this so that they're aware, because this would aid, as an example, which I showed you earlier, and I'm going to show you again. This is as an example, right? Now, Elijah Pool Bay, as an example, right? That's Elijah Pool Bay. Now, Elijah Pool Bay is known in contemporary history as Elijah Muhammad. And when you see Elijah Muhammad say, no nation can rise above its woman, and those of you who've had the honor or the integrity or the time to study some of the lessons that was presented, right, by him in the quote unquote temple of Allah, which is later known as Nation of Islam, have never had the opportunity to get past the degrees. You know, you have the MGT and you have the FOI, and then you have actual facts. And then Elijah Muhammad would say to them, this is before the infiltration, and of course he had to move around. He said, the supreme wisdom will be handed to you later. Some of what I'm presenting is supreme wisdom. And it's universal in its character. Because a lot of people think it just applies to the Adept Chamber of the Moorish Science Temple of America. No, it's not true. It also applies to the Nation of Islam, anybody that deals with nationhood principle or tribal order principle or clan order principle across the board. Now, I want to interject this too for qualification, Dr. J. Like, not unlike many people for lack of civic instruction. Now, not knowing what you would call maxim law, so the average being is not aware that when the hybrid occupiers are using the word civil powers, they're actually talking about admiralty law operations under booty and prize. Now, those who know already know that. The Certiorari would bring that back into what are called land jurisdiction. Now, these are just simple facts. It's known facts, but what I honestly recognize over the years is that people who know this information have a tendency to step back from it because it requires so much cleansing of the people, and they have a tendency to lean on the emotional arguments of their mistreatment to make them feel good. This is why it always ends up being race arguments, which is really not what it is. It's birthright theft, right? And so they won't go into the issue of certiorari because now they got to take this mob of people who don't know geopolitics, but want the benefit of it, but don't know they want the benefit of it because they don't know what they're asking for relative to rights, liberties, right of property, right of ownership, all deal with, i.e., the heirship established in law already under the rule of diversity. And that these people who have been claiming to be, quote unquote, their government are an interregnum operation of colonial powers. And just because decades and a century have passed, the status has not changed. Within the venue and within the analysis of which is done often by scholars, the so-called Dred Scott case tells you that. Superseding that, the William Dungy case of 1852, 3, 4, etc., under the so-called Christian Black codes, i.e., Chicago area, etc., reaffirms the bloodline status. Now, and so for those of you who care about your people, your family, and your heirship, and also are dealing with the diversity issue, etc., in the positive, not in the negative, in the positive, study the Dred Scott case, 1857, and study the William Dungy case. These are just secondary. And also the Sundry Free Moors case. Yes, study all them together, all right? And then have a clearer comprehension of the diversity issue that has been conveniently, but not for lack of information, but conveniently pushed aside to promote the 14th Amendment operations since 1954. And this is why redundantly, Dr. G, when we go over, constitutional and treaty enforcement, that many of our people thinking, because they're not familiar with this information, that it doesn't apply to them because they're, quote unquote, are indigenous, but they're not Moors kind of concept. This part, not knowing that that's a controlled narrative. You understand? But they would know it if they understood these civic principles and geopolitics. But remember, the schism operations is where that has its origin. And so you see the different tribals, the tribal brothers and sisters around the world debating with each other who's first type thing, not knowing that that was a controlled narrative that's not valid. And then not understanding that the argument, even among each other, is not with us diversity, but with the occupiers diversity. You see, and then knowing that they're in an interregnum, knowing that their tribal and clan administrative functions are supposed to be in place, right? No different than like say for instance like and a lot of what our people know to be, or what they have referred to as so-called $5 Indians, and if they would study what's happening in the background through the War Department, etc., with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and certain pseudo, but not real, sovereign restoration of rights or right to some land areas, how that's exercised, understand that their standing is diversity first and an certiorari claim, etc., to the administrative functions in accord with the existing and not dismissed or not dissolved treaty obligations, etc., pre-existing Ordinance 1787, i.e. Constitution 1788, Affirmative 1789, etc. And then, of course, for a few more years until Abraham Lincoln, who also litigated with the Dungy case that we referred to just a little earlier. They murdered Lincoln, and then they literally overthrew the Republic in order to overthrow the treaty. This is why ever since then you will see that they've been promoting what is commonly referred to here, particularly in North America, in all political administrative functions, i.e. racism and prejudice problems, and 14th Amendment arguments, civil rights. So that collage in its totality is a fraud to dismiss, i.e. the established diversity right of claim, not the diversity claim, the pre-established diversity right of claim already existing for the protections of all indigenous Aboriginal people, i.e. the true Americans, distinguished from the corporate operators who you know as colonial operators who've been misrepresenting themselves as Americans, etc., under interregnum operations. So I wanted to present that. And this is so that in the efforts of the different tribes and clans becoming conscious, as you can see what's happening all over the land, that they can come together intelligently and operate from the established supreme law that already exists and that these people are bound to. The discomforting area is, Dr. G, by people not knowing this, we how would you say, burn a lot of energy having meetings, trying to make things up, trying to get the best brains together. Let's have a brainstorm and bringing these people together. It's like which we always do. And get people's idea. What you want to do is get a knowledge of where the people are, because the principal idea was already set forth by our forefathers and our foremothers. Problem has been is that those who don't understand the indirect operations keep attributing a lot of these principles to the Europeans, who they ignorantly refer to as white man, which means the sovereign of the land. But they don't know that that's what it means, if you get the point. Now, and so in that gray area, when someone who understands the indirect operations presents the issue of their actual status, they will contest it based on their lack of information or their beliefs that it doesn't apply to them. While we're clear, that's why I'm making these statements. So these are the things that you're going to look at. Certiorari, spelling. Write this down, you all.
I already put it in.
Certiorai. And essentially, you're dealing with writs of certiorari. Diversity. Divercity. Interregnum. Interreg. Right? NUM. Repeat. INTERREGNUM. Now, essentially, the interregnum is an interval, or you're dealing with so we're dealing with what you call time of occupation. And so those of you who are indigenous will refer to the military operations known commonly to the people, the Cristoforo Colombo, written as Christopher Columbus, military operations, not just that man, military operations of an ancient war continuing. So they're taught in school that Christopher Columbus was an explorer, Europeans, and they were sailing from the Moorish city of Cadiz on behalf of Isabella and their other crew, etc., with the wars against the Moors, and then coming to the Moorish homeland, to the Maghreb, Western Hemisphere, and conquering the West, 1492. And so they become the interregnum government, i.e. So now you have the substitute government, etc. And the time period of the occupation is an interregnum. Are we clear? So as long as they've been operating here on the land is an interregnum. Are we clear? Because the true sovereign or the people of the land have been overthrown. It's not racism. You've been politically overthrown. In order to muddy the water, they claim to be Americans when they're not Americans. Are we clear? Then they hide behind religion and pedigree to hide their corruption, that they're really substitute de facto prima facie interregnum operatives under unum sanctum, which is the U.S. That's unum sanctum, right? Now that's important. So when you know that, because this is the other problem that we have, because many of our people don't know the real geopolitics, and many people who know aren't talking because it makes people uncomfortable. And because our people are always, by training, trying to be politically correct. So they try to tell the truth without telling the truth. They try to signify the truth without telling the truth. They try to imply the truth without telling the truth. However, time does not wait for us while we keep pushing the truth aside simply because the truth is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for those who have projected the lie, and it's uncomfortable for those who have accepted the lie. And so we have a collection of persons who create what you would call unconscionable contracts, and people who don't know geopolitics accepting unconscionable contracts. And thus, through that ignorance of those who are what you call the subjects of interregnum operations, by their lack of consciousness, are accepting interregnum unconscionable contracts as law. And we have been operating under that for generations. Are we clear, Dr. J? Mm-hmm. And this is why when we're trying to seek remedy, that this is how the results are always referred to. I'm referring to what people commonly call, they'll always say there's clearly a double standard. So what are they talking about, the standards? So identifying the standards. The standard is what? True republic and treaty law. That's the principle, right? Or obverse. And then you have color law, which is the reverse, which is the fraud. By fundamental geopolitics not and the real history not being taught to our people, they have a tendency, not a lack of sincerity, but for lack of information, keep what you call crossing lines. You know, like not understanding jurisdictional boundary. You know, because you already know jurisdictional boundary and venue would be a political knowledge, not an actual physical fence that you see. You know, or like if you're driving down a country road and a country road doesn't have stripes in the middle of it, you're using common sense to, according to the territory that you're operating in, to stay to the right. And in some jurisdictions, you would stay to the left, right?
Right.
But there's no line there. But if you're on what you call a main highway, it will have lines, whether you have double lines parallel, which means don't cross, right? Where you have spotted lines or broken lines, that would mean pass only when it's safe and you observe, right? And then you have single lines in what you call most city streets, whatever, which would pretty much hold to the same principle. Now, and so that would be called, in what you call political structure, jurisdictional. That would be geographical, or what you call territorial jurisdiction, in what you would call traveling rules of venue. In political venue, it's an abstract. So it would be treaty, venue, treaty, constitution, which would be the line of what you would call personam, subject matter, territorial. And logically, it has to be taught because it's an abstract. You see the point? And this is where the damage of the nom de guerre come in, because people don't know where their place in society is. And they've been diverted with the race argument to divert them off of the diversity proper position, you see? So it doesn't dawn on them that these people who they've been trained to think, not that they are, trained to think that they are our government, they keep going to them for administrative functions. And because they're interregnum and de facto, they're actually human traffickers, and they keep on doing what? Making POWs of our people on their own land, murdering them on the street, beating them on the street, mistreating them on the street. And our people start talking the Carlos Linnaeus mind control venue of the 1790s, etc., which is today called racism and or civil rights. That would be mostly on the Title 43. I think civil rights come on Title 43, right? Something like that, right? Instead of treaty and constitution enforcement, to which these people, by rule of ethics and by rule of written solemn oath, are bound to and have never been dissolved. It's of a general and permanent character, which we've gone over many, many times. So again, Dr. G, noting that the world is moving on these principles. And because the economic operations operating on the land at North America is bound by and dependent upon the treasury bond system that was created in 1862 on the indigenous people here, that has been the basis of their economic operations. That's a fact. And so when people started discovering those two executive orders established in the late 20s up until 1932-33 with Roosevelt, i.e. dealing with the birth certificate, etc., and with those derivatives that they bundled of all the corporate states and sent to 55 Water Street, right? And remember when they had that so-called fire and flood a few years back? I think it was during that was the Clinton administration and the Bush administration, right? And remember I think it was a statement, and I don't know the exact words, but many of you listening will do the research and you find the exact words, where George Bush said, if the people find out what we've done, they'd run us down or find us anywhere on the street and lynch us immediately. This has to do with the certiorari principle, right? And the diversity issue that they know that they're operating, that all of these governing bodies since Lincoln are an interregnum. So this whole period from Abraham Lincoln to today is an interregnum. Now, knowing that and knowing these principles, because remember, the reason why I've taken my time to hit all these points is because they're researchable. Because we already know that when you start dealing with the real geopolitics, that you're going to have trolls and you're going to have operatives that's going to immediately try to dismiss this information because it will kill the bond system. It has nothing to do with what they like you or not. It's the bond system. But because the nations of the world aren't buying them anymore, there's no need for us to keep on arguing this to people because it's becoming obvious. Not only that, you probably won't make it to next year before all your bank accounts are dissolved, that go to zero. So while we've been telling you this for years and years and years, and you think that we're making personal attacks against your beliefs or your religion or your tribe type thing, the reality when it hits home is when you really have to get down to the reality of your diversity position that has been ignored, and thus we collectively as a body have been declared incompetent. And thus everything, even when you're in the living form, has been in probate, as if you are dead. This is where the civil liter mortuus position or state ward or state property issue that our people think is a fashion fad actually comes from. However, because the economic system around the world is being reset, i.e., and the old SWIFT system is literally breaking down for real, not coming, it's already in this breakdown dissolution form. We need the best minds of these people among ourselves who have been sincere to actually come forth and start taking their places among the affairs of men competently on the pre-existing law. You don't need to make things up because it's a waste of time. Keep in mind, if the contract or the governmental administrative contract does not exist already, i.e., in a general and permanent character, these people that are operating interregnum have no obligation to contract with you. But the contract of what you call the social contract of treaty and constitution is already established, and they're already operative, and they're already in the area from an international perspective and factual perspective, moral and ethically already bound to them. And this is one of the problems that they're having around the world, Dr. G, when South Africa made the genocide claim on behalf of the Palestinians, and then it came out, which is obvious, how the United States and Britain, etc., don't recognize international law that they've been using against everyone else, yet they themselves don't acknowledge international law. And keep in mind, so when you're dealing with international law, this is for you scholars out there and for those who don't know civics, Lieber Code. So look at the Lieber Code, and the Lieber Code becomes the template for what is called international law or the law of wars all around the world. And then you, again, as we talked about redundantly, Dr. G, when we remind people to read the letter presented on behalf of Pope Francis via Anna von Rees and issued to Barack H. Obama, known as Civil Orders, issued July the 4th, 2014. And of course, that comes after the motu proprio, which most of you know about. So I'm hitting on some of these things so that you all can go over these things yourselves and start having a clearer comprehension of current operative geopolitics, so that those who have been and who will be doing or saying things to try to continue to control the mind control narrative, which they've had the advantage of, that they won't be successful in burning up your energy, diverting you from the issues of diversity that's always been at issue, but ignored conveniently and deliberately. by both the occupiers and many of the Aboriginal indigenous people who knew this and know this all the time, but know if they dispense this information, many of them will be exposed as the frauds and the traitors that they also have been. So I'm just giving you general information so that you can do your own research. And I know we're hitting on different, what appears to be different subject matter, but know that they're actually all connected. But there are areas of information that will develop your competence so that those among us who have been sincerely working on the issue of us being the Aboriginal indigenous people will not waste their energy making emotional but ineffective emotional arguments or burning energy continuously for themselves and others, coming together, having meetings that actually represent waste of time because they present incompetence. Because what you're dealing with is fundamental administrative functions based on contract law. Treaty law is a contract law. Constitution law is a contract law, i.e., one's business, corporate, but then you also have one that deals with what you call heirship. This is why you have the diversity issue in Article 3, Section 2, dealing with ministers, ambassadors, consulars. And so in order to muddy the water when they introduce the 14th Amendment operations, they would say you have right to counsel, C-O-U-N, not C-O-N-S-U-L. And it sounds similar, but it's not the same thing. And they have successfully imprinted on the people's mind a right of counsel when the deal is they have right of counsel. So I just want to throw that out there. And so your interjection or rebuttal in any what you call jurisdictional proceeding under any so-called municipal venue misrepresent, because remember, this is also important to remember, if the venue that is called or presented to you as a court is not Article 3, Section 2, it is not a court, cannot be a court, never was a court, never will be a court. Any operatives that claim ministerial authority as judge, etc., is essentially committing treason, and they're lying, and they've been doing it for generations. It's another reason why we're having this conversation. Your counter move with them, your rebuttal would not be an issue of guilt or not guilt. It's not even related. It would be an interjection of a writ of certiorari, which would be for your information in inquiry. And this would be also related to a bill of particulars or what you call a discovery pre-action or pre-jurisdictional claim. And this is why they also don't want people to know that the right of the beings to challenge jurisdiction pre, during, and or after any so-called proceeding is the standard of law. That's another reason they don't teach that. And this is, again, how they have, through our people being ignorant of administrative functions, have been prosecuting people unfairly and imprisoning people for crimes or violations that they didn't commit, or even that they did commit, and then were wrongly prosecuted without due process, not knowing that they were denied due process, etc. But the counter move or rebuttal as a standard of protocol. And this would be, like, say, for anyone who's a member of any organization or body's politics that says they are a nation, or says that they are a tribe, or says that they are a clan, any one of them, all of their leaderships already know, and it's not an attack, I'm just telling you the truth, that writ of certiorari is a standard protocol for all ministers who would take the position at that time of consul, because they would be wearing two crowns. And this would be the same thing, say any indigenous crown or any indigenous body or member of any indigenous clan or tribe, if there's an interchange with the operative indirect government, whether you deal with the municipal corporations, i.e. cities, state, or federal, the interregnum operatives, the diversity is already existing. It doesn't arrive, it already exists. However, the rights of protections are voided if the presented people is not presented in certiorari an administrative right of challenge of jurisdiction, which would be the certiorari. And so that would be harmonic with a discovery and a bill of particulars. And so for the moment, I yield the floor, Dr. G, accepting a question from yourself or continuation of the conversation. And again, it's important because while it's not said, I am identifying what's happening. Nations around the world are nationalizing, which is going to cause the stock market and the economic platform here at North America being first party operative subdivisional operations under the doctrine of discovery under U.S. Unum Sanctum Bulla from the Church of Rome, who are claiming to be somebody that they're not, also to collapse, which is happening right now. It's not going to happen. It's happening right now. And while they're not saying it, I'm telling you what's happening. So only for this purpose, for those who care, to start doing what is necessary to start protecting your family while we're going through this transition and the dissolution of all interregnum government operations around the world, which are really presented in the chambers of governments around the world as what? Decolonization. So if you don't know what's happening, I just told you. And if you think it does not going to affect you, I suggest that you think again. At the same time, knowing that as many people compromise, understand this, and I'm telling you right now, I'm not appealing to anyone to accept what I'm telling you, because I've been telling you this for years, but it's on you right now, and this is for those who are willing to take a position, because you're going to be forced to take a position whether you like it or not. And it's not personal, that's what it is. And so that you're not see, because we have not been taught geopolitics, we are kind of like the last one in what you call the cognate venue of real geopolitics, particularly here. The people here in North America known as Indians, Black, Aboriginal, Moors, etc., Negroes, quote unquote, these are all tags, basically, at North America, who are really Phoenician tribes who've really been under European colonial operation for the last couple hundred years and have really been under unum sanctum operations, not some country operations. The venue is falling apart. Whether you participated in it or not is irrelevant because you have no hand in it. Now let's get that straight. What we believed that we thought we knew about this stuff matters not. What it is what it is. And what I've told you is researchable and true facts. And I'm only saying it so that we can, knowing that there's mass destruction coming, that the people have some kind of consciousness that they can try to preserve and protect their families, even though, let's be real, casualty is going to be massive. That's the real truth. There's no need to sugarcoat this thing. But people who are not aware of the real geopolitics are going to be the easiest ones devoured, or what they refer to in the unum sanctum operations, those who have capitulated would be the easiest ones to make food. That statement is proper. That's not an exaggeration. That's proper. So they're going to reduce the population. That's a fact. How they do it is going to be through war, famine, economic, and psychic attacks. I've named some of them. You can find the rest of them in your own research. I've told you the absolute truth. Do with it what you will. Again, like I said, Dr. J, I yield the floor for any questions that you might have.
I can give you some of the questions that I've starred here, just a few. Here's one. Well, this one asks, so I'm guessing that it means, should Moors join Masonic fraternity? Should Moors, it's not written clear, so now I'm looking at it. So they're asking whether Moors should join a Masonic fraternity. Doesn't make sense.
No, yes and no. It's according to where you are. It kind of sort of like things are so far going now, Dr. G. It's almost like anything that we kind of do now, we're already starting the race behind the curve. For such a person, I would tell them, go to the Moorish Science Temple of America and get all your fundamental information. You got 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth. Close your mouth, open your eyes, and open your ears. Study, do research. You'll get more from the Moorish Science Temple than you'll get from any lodge. Because remember, Masonry is essentially Moorish science, but not Freemasonry as you've been told it is. They're totally separate. Are we clear? So when you see that doesn't represent Masonry. That represents pedigree bloodline. Nativity, i.e. the real Al-Moroccans. And so people who don't know think it means Islam. No, that's the pedigree of the Canaanite Moabites, the first peoples on the planet, i.e. the original men, the original peoples of earth, i.e. original human. The work is in that direction. In your fundamental presentation, you will not hear that said only in what you call adept chamber or within information displayed in what in this order would be referred to as supreme wisdom. In the Moorish Science Temple, we call adept chamber. Same thing. And they all put that crown on. Those who have conquered us, understand, use a fraternal order and use your crown as a token of conquest. It doesn't belong to them. It belongs to you. It is known as Corona Sol, which means crown of the sun. Universal.
Okay, so
and that's not Freemason Lodge. Are we clear?
Next question. Okay, so if you know your bloodline, what is the next step? Who do we talk to?
It would be what you call geopolitical, civil knowledge, and restoration issues of heirship, claiming, restoring the right of a state. That would be the missionary work. And that would be called geopolitical heirship information.
Meaning how does
that would be competence. So some of the information that I talked about is part of what it would be called nationalization. As an example, let me give you an example because I know a lot of people don't understand this. But I'm giving you a directional train of thought. When people go into those lodges, they get a lot of what they refer to of these Phoenici people here. Most who don't know they're Phoenici because they think North America is India because they were told that. That's why they say we're Indians. This is not India. But we already know they classified this as that, right? So as an example, what you see happening today, we're talking about current events, where you see the political confusion taking place in all major cities in North America. As an example, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, etc. Seattle, as an example, right? Houston, Texas, all your major cities, Tampa, Florida, etc., Miami, all this type of things. And you'll see the interregnum political operatives of the Whiggamore party of consigned wigs and cotton wigs pretending for the public venue as quote unquote, i.e. Republican and Democratic parties, which is a uniparty, Whiggamores, right? Arguing so-called immigration and border fence and problems, etc. Now, in the proper operations of what you call naturalization, not nationalization, naturalization, which is coming up because remember what's happening right now for them covering up the dissolution of the Swiss international trade system venues and the brick operations. They already know that the economic systems of the Circle Church and Chantry of the voucher system that the people know that's dealt with by the administrators of what they know as both the General Education Board, the Congressional Industrial Military Complex, and the Federal Reserve, and the WEF, and the IMF, all connected, are collapsing. That's the truth. Now, in order to divert the people from recognizing this, they deliberately opened up the borders and let people come in outside of the established law venue of the naturalization process to cover up the collapsing of all your major cities' economics, which is because the treasury bonds are no longer accepted around the world, and that they, in conjunction with the lack of people or nations buying the bonds because they're nationalizing around the world, that the economics here is in a state currently of collapse, not going to collapse, in a state of collapse right now. So how do you cover that up? They know that one of the first signs of the collapse of the quote unquote fiat currency reserve status system is dead, not dying, dead. They have to keep wars going on to cover it up. And because the municipalities operative around in all of the corporate states can't fund any large projects anymore because no one's buying US Treasury bonds. Fact, they have to steal people's accounts. So anyone with a bank account will here and there will be getting letters from the bank saying, oh, we have noticed that someone was trying to mess with your account, and some of your accounts have went to zero, and we have to work with some of the problems because they've been getting your information off your phone, blah, 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 blah. And then they're going to force you into CBDCs, which we've been telling you for the last couple of years. That's another subject matter by itself. That's what's going on right now. Now, so that they can maintain power. However, it's only a matter of time. And I'm telling you already, they are going to run it. Meaning, I'm just making you aware of it. They are going to run it. But I'm suggesting understanding the geopolitics that will only last for a little while, and then that will collapse. All right. So opening up the borders gives them, quote unquote, voters for the Klan party of the demos operations of the Uniparty that you've been told is the Republican and Democratic Party, which is really the Ku Klux Klan. That's what it is. Now, understand some of the Klanners have always been constitutionalists, but some of the Knights have been anti-constitutional. So you have that clash among the conscience operatives and the cotton operatives. So this is the battle they're having with themselves. For those who want to know the real or how to operate within what they would refer to the matrix system, if they're women, they will go into, i.e., only the European women. Because remember, only European women can be daughters of the American Revolution. Only Europeans. So the European woman would be daughters of the American Revolution, and some of the indigenous or Aboriginal people will be allowed to go into Eastern Star or daughters of ISIS, mostly Eastern Stars. And then the controlled, quote unquote, subdivisional priesthood, usually 32, 33 degree Masons, as an example, some of the names, any of these people that march these people around on their own land, Masons. Let's get over that. This is so that they get some of this information and then they can't teach it so that they can get paid from Rome with their 501c3 skull and bones kickback agreement, pretending It came from Jesus. And also, so that the people who are called the sheeple pay them, and they play the shepherd game, and they're subdivisional, or they have filial allegiance to the Circle Church and Chancery, Fleet Street, England, and all the judicial platforms operative here and in Canada are operated from Fleet Street, England, Circle Church and Chancery. Do your research. And so this goes back to the certiorari. So if you're not rebutting their position, they're assuming what you call in personam jurisdiction. They go into these lodges so they can learn true Moorish science, and they'll call it ancient Egyptian knowledge. Except that's how they present, or they'll call it the arch degree of Masonic order. So they study actually ancient Canaanite, Moabite, Gnostic culture. Yes, yeah. And they'll just say, yeah, Egyptians. They'll say know that Egyptian is really, he cooked up. So I'm telling you that this is where you get Ptah from. And in the priesthood, they'll call Ptah Peter. So they'll say Peter is Jesus's boy type thing. So understand all these are codes, but it's really Moorish science, Moorish culture. And understand Moorish is only contemporary in modern times. Moor is short for Moorish or ancient Canaanite Moabites. This is why when Ali made the restoration claim of the lost estate of the indigenous people, he set up what is known as the Old Canaanite Temple. It's a restoration of estate claim for reinforcement of the existing law and obligations of international law, heirship of occupied people, indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. Those who know the civic operations know that that's what it is. It has nothing to do with religion. Although religion is used to protect the estates under what you call religious rights in international law. It has nothing to do with you praying about anything. It has to do with your estate. Now, of course, if you tell these people this from the beginning, they get all emotional because of their belief training, whether they're claiming to be Jews, Christians, or Muslims, all the same. They're called Abrahamic religions. And this is like when you've seen, as an example, Trump, when he was in office, they created what is called the Abrahamic Accords. This is for them legitimizing the operations of the Khazarians at Canaan, which is called Palestine, patterned after the operations here with the Trail of Tears, the Niagara slaughter, etc. All of these things, i.e., the bombing of Move in Philadelphia, i.e., bombing in Oklahoma. All of it's related. So now they go into lodges and they learn the real politics, which is the U.S., which is Unum Sanctum, Romanus Pontifex, Inter Caetera Divina, Sister QV Act 1666. This is where your Sister QV trust operations and the QSIC number that's on the Social Security number established with the trading of people with the birth certificate in 1932, 1933 with Roosevelt. All of this is all connected. So they go into them lodges to learn the real politics and history, and logically, because they're really in filial subdivisional service to the Pope of Rome under the Unum Sanctum operations, their political cover here, and this is for those who know that you're indigenous. Look at all land claims where Europeans have stolen land with indigenous people, and you'll see in all of the Supreme Court determinations, you'll see the doctrine of discovery. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. The certiorari writ is a counter move for the discovery of the true information. Thus, you must be competently conscious in order to make the counter move, to make what you call adverse claim or right of estate, which all these people are actually doing now, that are now not, they know that we've been called black, but they know that we're not black. And so when you see these people start claiming their proper status as being the people of the land, i.e. the true Al-Moroccans, which means descent, that's what the word means. American means descendants, that's what the word means. It's a dialectical what you call high Germanic dissertation of Moroccans or Moabite. That's what it is. The short is Moors. So you're indigenous, but now you're talking about the bloodline. So don't understand that that makes them different people. Don't make them different people. We're dealing with status, pedigree. You're dealing with social political classifications to cause schisms among the people so that they don't come together, use their intelligence, and effectively make certiorari writ claims of reversion of a state. This is what they're trying to avoid. This is what we're trying to clear up with the people so that you can stop wasting your time having time-wasting meetings on things that you're trying to make them recognize. And that indicates that you're incompetent because you don't know that the obligation already exists with them. This is why they've been declared on the international forum in international law as a quote-unquote rogue state. Now, just because they're rogue does not mean that you don't stand on principle. They're trying to get you to not stand on principle so they can justify their corruption. I just want you to know that. So when you see the counter trolling, that's what its origin. When you see people upset with this information, they're telling you who they are. Go ahead.
Okay, here's a question. Can you please speak on your history with the Nation of Islam so they can know you know what you're talking about? Weren't you a student minister?
Yes. See, what people don't know, Nation of Islam was first Temple of Allah. In the 20s, when led by J. Edgar Hoover, operative under the United States Corporation Company, infiltrated the old Canaanite temple with operatives, or what you call infiltrated the old Canaanite temple, which civically, with a civic registration as a civic organization known as Moorish Holy Temple of Science, etc. First Moorish Temple of Science, etc., which is the restoration of the estates of the indigenous people, particularly of the Americas, etc., and taking on, after that infiltration by J. Edgar Hoover with the COINTELPRO operations, the Moorish Science Temple of America. And with that breakup, this is where you see, like in the Philadelphia area, Fowler Divine, Bishop Johnson, Bishop Cherry, all these people, all of them have this information. That's why you see Fowler Divine and all of them, they be going like this. That's peace. That's indicative that they're indigenous. Now, to break up the coming unity of the people, they infiltrated that, and then the break off, and you can find this in the congressional records, and you'll find it under the title in the journals. You can go to Washington, D.C., go research a journal, and one section that you'll find it under is called History of American Religions, and it's really a civic dissertation of the history here. And then you see the break off, or split up of the Moorish Temple of Science, and then one of the break offs is the Temple of Islam, of which Elijah Poole Bey, who's now known as Elijah Muhammad, was an adept, and to keep part of the movement principle going on in spite of the infiltration, became later known as Nation or the Temple of Islam, then the Nation of Islam.
So how long were you a part of?
About 2 or 3 years. And on a short period, because I always did research, that's not a boast, that's just simply a fact. I became assistant minister within 6 months. But after a while, I to be honest with you about my sojourn there, is I recognized that I was being put in positions of power, or what presumed power, authority. I figured it out later that it was done more to control me or to shut me up. However, I don't do what I do for titles, although people have called me titles here and there. Titles mean nothing to service to the people. And that's when I left. And there's other reasons, because I start recognizing principles, because I had a background. When I went in there already, because I do research. And I recognize when you start telling certain information, and this is organizationally everywhere, when you really start telling the truth of the human condition, it makes people uncomfortable. And as a matter of fact, part of the motivation of me founding Moore's Ordered Roundtable, officially in around 1982, was for that major reason. Because I recognize in order for me to not feel restricted, or because, when you start telling the truth, people start trying to get you out of position. Oh, we're removing you from office because you talk too much. You shouldn't be telling people that. They ain't ready for all these kind of things. So I recognize that if I'm going to tell the truth, I can't be a so-called subordinated member of organization in that sense. Not that I don't respect organization. Don't misunderstand me. So that's why I've always used Moore's Order Roundtable to actually publish things that I researched, and also officially, reasonably, for those who know, most of these lesson books that I have created over the years since the late 80s until now have originally started for me making my own children erudite and family members, and I just started sharing it, with the public. And then when I came into the Moore Science Temple, I already knew about the Moore Science Temple because I learned some of it from when I was in the Nation of Islam as assistant minister. But and as some of you who know me know, I was in the inner circles, just like I'm here with Dr. G. At my house, Joe Tex ate food at my house. Muhammad Ali ate food at my house. Sterling, Lieutenant Sterling, I was with them. Many of the celebrities. So I was in the circle, if you get the point. And in the circle, I also was learning, even though at that time I was 19, 20 in that area. The conversations among scholars is not the conversations that you have among so-called members. And the more I was around them, the more I understood how much they knew about Noble Drali and everybody's ziplet, whatever their reasons were, which were variable. And knowing that people are emotional and don't understand certain things are not said publicly. But when you think that they didn't have fezzes in them chambers, that's why I brought this picture. This is a picture. It's not a photograph, fill paper, that's a picture.
Yeah.
From when I was 19. And I'm 78 now. You understand? And but the point that I'm making is people look at all these organizations for the most part incorrectly, if you get the point. And it's not an issue of condemning or supporting. It's the issue of telling you the truth, because all of this is your history. Whether you're a part of it or not it's still your history. So when people see this, they're not thinking on their surface that he was standing for the rights of indigenous people. They'd be looking at it like he's a religious guy. Same thing with Drali. You understand? Same thing with Marcus Garvey. They're not looking at they were actually dealing with civic issues of the restoration of these people lost the state, because they're not taught geopolitics. But that's at the root of all of these movements. And so I teach geopolitics. That's why you always see me, for all the time that I've been generally public, Dr. G, I have mastery in many other disciplines that I don't talk about, including metaphysics. Although you don't see me talking metaphysics, I'm still talking metaphysics, but not the way most people talk metaphysics, because I more or less stay down to earth. I want to fix things here. In other words, I don't want to just have a discussion with you what's on the dark side of the moon. I want to have discussions with you of why the IRS has been robbing you and destroying your family. Are we clear? How they've been using secret estates against you with a name that sounds like yours that no one's talking about, that's creating your economic problems. But it sounds interesting if we talk about, not that they're not of interest, because they absolutely are. If I would say do dissertations on Hermetic law, the Emerald Tablets and things like that, and the Sirius and the Orion, or the polar stars, etc., dark side of the moons around Jupiter and Venus, the dark sun, all of these things are related to us historically. But my issue is this. You know, like people would like to talk about the great political matrix of the demon octopus type thing, Dr. G. And they say, well, why Taj is always talking about the tentacles? He should be talking about the great evil of the demon octopus. It's not that I'm not interested in the demon octopus. I'm interested in the that tentacle that's on my arm. And I'm saying, all of you get out your blades and cut them tentacles. And that's while you can get to that octopus. Because you start removing his tentacles, he has no power. His power is not the body of the octopus. His power is the tentacles that keep hitting you. So that's your three-letter agencies. That's the Inquisition operations, known to you as the IRS. All these things are misrepresented. All of these deal with stealing your right of estate. Your political claim of right of reversion would be in what we call a certiorari writ, representing both bill particulars, inquiry, correction of status, and non-assumptive jurisdiction issues, demonstrated by a competent heir speaking on right of self, not being represented, but presenting self. Thus, the principle that you always hear, Moors or people, be yourselves. It's called proper person status, i.e. impropria persona sui juris sui heritus. That's what this man stood for, but you would get that information only in Supreme Wisdom Chamber or in the Moorish Science Temple, i.e. Addab Chamber. But the common people, this information has been held back from them. That's why I established Moors Order Roundtable, and I've been giving the information out freely for decades. And logically, people who have other agendas, logically, are going to troll. But I'm giving you some reference points so that once you get on this path yourself, you don't need me, you don't need no leader guys, none of them. You will be capable of beginning to, knock the weeds out of your own path. In other words, I'm not giving you fish sandwiches, I'm giving you a fishing pole. Take it. Deal with it how you choose to.
Here's a question that's popped up a couple times. Wants to know if you know about Mexico versus Ecuador fighting in international court right now. What's your take on that?
Same thing. All nations are nationalizing. That's what they're doing. They're dealing with the resources. So now they're dealing with what? I.e. the pedigree, listen carefully, jus sanguinis population in controversy with jus soli population, and clearing up the issue of diversity, which is what our subject matter. And this is back to Dr. G. What I'm saying is people have been talking this subject matter, not knowing that they're talking this subject matter. You understand what I'm saying to you? I'm just making you aware of what you're actually talking about, what's actually going on. And so what we're appealing to is those who sincerely want to help Indigenous and Aboriginal people to make yourself competent so that our people aren't, controlled by the reconstructing narrative that's designed to create division and to have us burn our energies with, emotionally charged but wasted time in meetings. And that we can get to the root of subject matter and thus deem and show ourselves competent to present ourselves, thus not needing representation by alien members of the Circle Church and Chancery, known as the quote-unquote B.A.R Association, also known as the British Accredited Registry Operatives of the Circle Church and Chancery, putting our states in probate, i.e. in chancellor courts. And this is also how they've been stealing your houses under so-called alleged debt that you don't owe, i.e. and foreclosing on properties and gentrifying our communities. That's all connected. Your counter rebuttal would be a writ of certiorari. And logically, you need to know about your pedigree and estate to have standing to even make that claim in personam. That's the truth. And this is why a lot of times when our people begin to know that they're indigenous to the land, and if they're making the issue or the argument on that reality and that fact, but emotionally, without understanding the principles, they would take your papers or your claim of right and convert it into pro se when it should be in propria persona, which changes the status. It seems that they would not say that you're presenting yourself, that you're representing yourself. Then that gives them what you call subject matter jurisdiction. But if you don't know jurisprudence, you wouldn't know that trick. This is why we continuously been teaching civics, because we also know with all the many people many women have always been coming together or having meetings trying to protect our communities or try to solidify our communities. If they don't know these things, they waste their time, and they have a lot of people in meetings wasting everybody's time with making emotional arguments of racism and color, not knowing that's an indication of incompetence, absolute incompetence. But they don't know that because they're operating from an emotional perspective. But in law, in order for an heir, we're talking heirship now, to be heritable, they must be competent. And this is where the wardship, write this down, wardship tenure. So the wardship tenure operations is really the military operations under the interregnum operation of the United States Corporation Company, how they've been successfully promoting themselves as the country, and they've been getting over with it because our people don't know basic civics. Again, while we've been doing what we've been doing here forever at the House of Reawakening Minds, and knowing that a lot of people don't comprehend immediately what we're saying, but we're giving you reference points, because we can't tell you everything in these meetings of a couple hours. We can give you directional information that once you start vesting in yourself, not only will you find out what we're telling you is true, you'll find out how many dirty people are around you that you've been trusting, which is a lot of people. Sometimes when they get into this information, you get disappointed when you find people around you that gave you the idea that they were really in support of principle, and you discover in the background they've been trying to stab you because they've been compromised. But it's not a matter of promoting division, it's a matter of telling you how to identify who's who. In other words, with civic knowledge, you can pull the mask off of everyone. And thus the prima facie operatives, doesn't matter who they are exposed. That's why they don't teach geopolitics to indigenous people. Because once you know the principles, because remember, the principles is not dealing with person or station, it's dealing with maxims. And so it's neutral. And that's symbolized by, you see, the feminine principle of justice with a bandana around her eyes, and then you see her have scales. That's what it means. That means she doesn't recognize person or principle or station. It's principle. So that's when you get into what you call positive law, known as jurisprudence. But negative law is classified as law, but it is not law. But only for the sake of study, it is called negative law. That's why those who know law know that 11th Amendment out is all negative law. All your positive laws, Constitution, Treaty, Article 1 to 10. That's the truth. Now, anyone that knows true jurisprudence knows that as a fact. And in what you call de facto administrative teachings of what you call law, they will teach you process. They will not promote that principle.
So with that, we're almost at the end of the session, but we do want to let you all know that we returned to our fourth Friday, which is our monthly civics class at the House of Reawakening Minds. And it will be next Friday, May 24th, from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. And the doors open at 6:30 p.m. at the House of Reawakening Minds. We had an awesome meeting, if you will. We had our conference a couple of weeks ago, and many of you were here from all over the country,
from the
coast
West
to coast, and north
from
to
the north to the south,
and we appreciate you. And for those who want to get up close and personal with Grand Sheik and myself and others that are coming, we still have a good turnout normally, coming from all over. We're back, so it'll be every fourth Friday. And our first one, please, help us make it a good inaugural, because we haven't had a fourth Friday since since the end of 2023.
Yes.
So we suspended it leading up to the conference we just had. So from 7 to 9:30, there should be some information. It may not be here today, but at least by tomorrow, so on our website, houseofreawakeningminds.com. And Grand Sheik, we're also coming back with some more unfilters.
Oh, yes.
So I want to let you all know that there is an unfiltered coming up on Tuesday, May 28th, 2024, with Mrs. Dr. Sebi Everest Patsy Bowman, and it's entitled Healing with Native Vegetation. It is free. But you do have to pre-register. I don't believe it is up yet. It will probably be up on, the link will be up on houseofreawakeningminds.com within a day or so that you can register in order to be a part of that. And the reason why we do unfiltered is when, we know that the information will be sensitive and maybe,
because in open forum, they already know it will be censored.
Yeah,
we already know. We don't. I say they've been doing it so long. Everybody knows why.
Right. So we want Mrs. Dr. Sebi to be able to share some really great information with regard to healing with native vegetation. Right now, she's got me on some of her products, and I tell you, they say the bitter the better. So she done sent me some bitter. She done sent me some stuff that's kind of. So by the time,
the bitter the better.
Yeah, I was like, I had to call her and ask. I said, "Is there anything I can put with this to bypass my tongue and just get it down in my?" But that'll be on Tuesday, May 28th. You will have to register for that, but like I said, it is free. And then I don't have it up yet, but we have another unfiltered coming up behind that. It'll probably be a week or so later, probably on a Friday. Maybe I don't know what date it will be, but look for it. And it'll be with Eric, brother Eric Easy Carter, who just came out with the Rick Simpson oil. That if y'all want to know about Rick Simpson oil, I want you to just Google it or go to YouTube and look up Rick Simpson oil. Well, this brother Eric, who's been on the show once, we call him the Encyclopedia of Cannabis. He has just put out his product, which is the Rick Simpson oil. I can't tell you exactly what it do on here because
it has to be.
I can't say it, but you want to.
It has to be an uncensored venue.
So it'll be an unfiltered with him and a couple of other unfilters, because I think it's important, Grand Sheik, we do at this point that we can get as much information to you as possible that is going to help you as you navigate through this situation.
And it's called a reset.
Right.
Because remember, the reset has a positive
absolutely
and a negative side.
Right.
The negative side is for the Khazarian operatives who've been controlling the world, or they've called themselves secret God of the world, to continue the rule that's going on since the last millennia for thousands of years, dealing with the priesthood, etc., essentially headed by the Pope of Rome, or into what is called the New World Order of the restoration of the Asiatic African peoples of the land, or the continuation of the Roman Empire of Satanists. That's what's happening right now.
Right.
So that's the reality of the reset. So if people keep thinking it's just what they think, they've been presented as a so-called monetary system.
This isn't the first one. If you will go back and study, you'll find out that there have been several such resets in other other ages.
And that's only with the monetary system.
Right.
What the people need to recognize, you're talking about interregnum sovereign governing operations with the voucher system of fiat that are called the monetary system, which is usually the focus to keep you off of this position, which is superior to all this. These are only instrumentalities of moving the sister QV that the people still don't know. That's why they don't know their vouchers. That's why, because that's how you can know that the people are still asleep, because they're still calling the vouchers money. Even when they understand that money is the gold and silver, they're still calling the vouchers money.
I'm going to put
so until they're purged, they're not competent. Are we clear? And this is why it's difficult, Dr. G, because people got to remove their egos and start telling them the truth.
I'm putting the just so they'll know. Here's the link right here. If you want to register for this, I just put the link in the chat. Get it going and register now. Make sure that you'll get. If you see that, that is the link for those. So it's https://streamyard.com/9 lowercase bz 3 lowercase xh 6 lowercase hn. Just in case it doesn't show up, you can hear my voice and put that in there, and you can register and be ready for this particular Unfiltered. We're going to go. We appreciate you all. We love you. We hope to see some of you or many of you on next Friday here at the House of Reawakening Minds, 602 Vanderbilt Avenue, right here in the beautiful city of Wilmington, Delaware.
Wilmington Territory.
Wilmington Territory.
Because remember,
yeah.
All right, Wilmington
Delaware.
Territory, aggregate,
okay.
Aggregate, City of Wilmington, corporate farm venue.
Okay, there. Yeah, here. However you get here.
Yes.
Put the coordinates in
Territory.
or whatever. Then we hope to see you.
Yeah.
But we are out of here, and we want you to go in and register. Like I
Anyway,
said, I put the link in the chat. Click on it now, copy it, and go and register.
Have a good evening.
Maybe the first 5 people or so that register, maybe I'll have something. We will give you guys something. But anyway, go and register, and we will see you. And if you have not clicked that like and the share before you leave, please at least give us a like.
One interjection.
Okay? Yeah, we're not monetized, but it's good to know whether or not you like what we're presenting.
Remember this, House of Reawakening Minds, and I commend you again, even though we're brothers and sisters and family and everything, I commend you for maintaining the integrity of this platform, for the diversity of information that comes through, to give the liberty of free thinking and dispensation of information, and remind you all, the House of Reawakening Minds is not monetized. However, the House of Reawakening Minds is here to support you. Therefore, through your moral ethics, support the House of Reawakening Minds. And have a grand evening.
Oh, wow. Let us get out of here, for I have to say something back. We love you.
The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a life I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds. Come to know and find out what is true, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds.
And just let me tell y'all, I just gave y'all the wrong link, but the right link will be on the website. So I do apologize. That takes you into the studio. That was the wrong link. I will have the right link up at houseofreawakeningminds.com. All right. Peace.